Okay, so it is 6 o'clock, so it looks like it is time to get started. So let me switch cameras around, get the music down to a nice background level. So welcome. Thanks for spending a little bit of time this evening. I'm excited to open up this Pengineer3d box. After last week's stream of doing the ink samples, I realized that I needed something better. And thanks to quick shipping and local, other small businesses within the States, I have something to open for that today, and I have a video that'll be coming out Saturday morning, but I'm going to show the pen because the video is already scheduled to be released. It's already available to channel members, which, by the way, if you're interested in becoming a channel member to get early access to videos, you can click on the join link below the video or on the stream just to get more information of how that works. It's a pretty inexpensive price, and you get a couple other features, but it has all the information on that there. But let's not delay. Let's get started. So I'm going to start off by showing first the new pen from Pens by Pasquale, and then I'll get into the unboxing of the Pengineer3d after that. So let's switch cameras. And let's take a look at this pen. So when the video comes out, you'll get a little bit more context, but this pen came to be from doing my DWRDnet stationery feed, where I've interviewed different makers and small business owners in the stationery hobby. And when I interviewed Lisa Marie from Poorly Controlled, I realized I didn't own anything that she had made. So luckily, having a pen maker local, I was able to reach out to Nick Pasquale, who I already had a pen from, and he was another guest on the show, and he happened to have some of the materials from Lisa Marie. So after looking through the materials, I decided, let's use that material. And then he had just started doing these. This is his Cerberus model, which is a 12-side faceted pen that looked really interesting to me. So I thought combining those two would be a great option. And here we are. So let me switch over to the desk camera. Just to hold this up closer, the polishing on this is ridiculous. I texted Nick when I took the photo to use as the YouTube thumbnail. When I was editing it, I had to go back and take it again because this is polished so well. You could see my fingerprints on every single facet. So it's polished incredibly well. It's 12 perfectly even facets around the body. And and the material is thinner than you would think too. It's a pretty thin, and it's getting that in the right angle. It's translucent in some parts of it, which is interesting, but this material is called Bourbon and Smoke, and it's one, when talking to Lisa Marie, if you're familiar with the pen community and you know who Drew Brown is, this was a blank that was inspired by Drew, who's been a staple in the pen community for some time and has his own YouTube channel now, and he's now the president of Farney's Pens in Washington, D.C. So a neat little backstory on the material, but I really like how this looks. It's a standard extra fine Bach nib, so it's nothing crazy in terms of writing, but I do have some paper here. I'll just do a quick little sample. This is just some Life Bank paper, and the ink that I have in here that you'll see in the video as well is Papier Plume Oyster Gray, and I chose the gray because there's some gray undertones in this material, and it was a good mixture of that coming through. Sorry, I was just adjusting the microphone a bit there. It sounded a little loud. really like this so far, and even though it's a larger diameter pen, it's very light, so it's nice to write with. So you would definitely check out that video when it releases to everybody on Saturday morning. Unless you're a member, then you have access now, so hopefully you'll get a chance to watch that with the early access. But definitely a fan of everything about this. Just this, how it came to be, of doing the interviews, getting to learn more about Lisa Marie and Poorly Controlled, and then getting a chance to collaborate with Nick. 'Cause this is actually my first fully commissioned fountain pen, or I guess my first fully commissioned pen of any sort. So that was a nice experience to get a relatively short wait in terms of a custom pen out of a material that I got to choose out of what he already had on hand, because he had already had Lisa Marie's materials, because she makes some really cool blanks. So just a neat collaboration. So that is the Cerberus, and yeah, I don't really have much else to say. Like I said, the video will come out on Saturday. But let's get to the other big part, just get started, because it's the part I'm also very excited about, to have some new toys to play with to help just writing in general, but especially on these streams. So I'm going to set the box like this because I didn't think in advance to mark out my address on the box. But this box is from Pengineer3d, and let's see, we're taped on the bottom here. And this is going to be, and let me pop up, actually, I have it pulled up here where I can switch over to it. Get to the right tab. So this is the website, if you're not familiar. I saw a few people got things here from, I think, the Atlanta show. And then I believe he was also in DC. But it's 3D printed fountain pen related things. So let's switch over back to the overhead camera here. So you can see here we have the box. It's got the Pengineer3d. Thank you for your purchase. Talks about the ink station. It's actually a pretty descriptive. It's got a link to a YouTube channel for more information, Instagram. So definitely great for some documentation to go with it. So let's get this out and see what we're working with. And I'll just kind of set everything down because, as you're obviously seeing, I'm opening this up for the first time. I have a general idea of how this will all work, but we shall see. And this is a somewhat modular system that you can get parts of this. There's a single, a double, a triple. And then within that, you can choose different colors of what color you want it to be made out of. So I did a couple of different options just to have some variety. And the important part, a sticker. That'll be good to go into the journal. Okay, so that looks like that's everything. So just get this put off to the side. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. So, like I said, it's a modular system. And if you look on the bottom here, there's channels, and then on this kind of 3 base tray, it's got where that's going to sit in there and kind of hold in. So that way it's going to give a little bit of stability to the different parts. Okay. So Okay, let's start with this one. So this is used for when you're inking pens. This has some adjustability here of how you can slide this up and fit it in a bottle. And I've grabbed a couple of bottles that I have here to the side. So let's grab a couple and I'll kind of show how this works. And part of this is it's meant to fit just about any type of bottle because of the different shapes and configurations you can do it in. So you would just slide that up, and then find the appropriate catch. So to hold in a round bottle, that little triangle shape there holds that in nice and firm. So now when you're inking the pen, you don't have to worry about tipping your bottle over. It's going to have nice strong hold. And then it even has a little sponge here to catch drips or wipe off your nib. I'm not going to wet that tonight because I'm not inking a pen. But that's a neat little thing. And then just to show other bottle varieties. So square bottle. And because of the shape of this, a square bottle fits in there pretty well as is. But, once again, that corner locks in there really well. Now, it's my understanding, even with just a single ink vial, this will slide down. And you can see there, that will fit in as well and hold a single vial. So once again, you're not really having to worry about that tipping over as you're inking a pen or doing swatching or things like that. So that gives you some variety, a little bit of better chance of saving the desk. And as my desk mat already has its battle scars, as you can kind of see underneath the ink bottle here, this will be helpful. But also just for storage, having that there, and this round piece slides out and you could put one of these other ones in here if you wanted to have essentially a revolver type style of ink holder. And then the one in the middle is static because these outer rings come off there, and you can see that it's just enough where it will catch a lid of a ink vial. But these have solid bottoms and the middle is open, so you can put that in there. And you can also, because you can get these printed in different colors, mix and match. So if you want the black on the gray, etc. And then, so that's kind of the rough overview of that. So let's swap this all back around here. Put this back on here. We'll set this off to the side. And then let's talk a little bit more about this. So as I said, I opted for the 3 section holder. There's a single, a double, and a triple, but I wanted to have flexibility. So if I wanted to put the ink bottle thing on here or whatnot. Now, I think when I ordered, I was thinking that I was getting this in the one color and then the other, so I'd have a little bit of a color theme, but that's really not going to bother me because this one here is meant to store pens. And inside of here, let me see if I can hold it over to the side camera just to show. You can see there's little bits of foam in there, so your pen is not going to be sitting right on the 3D printed material, which might scratch it. So that's nice. Just to show that there. And once again, the center is static, so you can have a single pin in there. But this way you can have, and I don't know that if all of my pins will fit. The Cerberus is kind of tight, but with the facets and the larger diameter, that kind of makes sense. But like this is my glass dip pin for ink swatching. That could live in there. You know, obviously a small pin like an antique ballpoint will fit. So this is my Gravitas Sentry. Got a Leonardo, a Cocugno. And then this is a pin I'm borrowing for the upcoming remake of the extra fine nibs. This is a Franklin Christoph with a Nagahara needlepoint on it. So that will be, or Masayama needlepoint, I believe it is. That'll be fun once I actually get a chance to use that. Thanks to Nick from the local pin club for letting me borrow that. Because I'm trying as much as I can to get 30 nibs, to double the number of nibs that I had last time, but don't know if that's going to work out. But that is the hope. Then here's another one that's a bigger pin. Now this is the Asvine C80, and you can see it barely fits in there. And I think that Pengineer3d might offer one that has slightly bigger outer holes. Possibly. I might be confusing that with a different pin tray, but I don't anticipate putting all my pins in here. I think having a rotation, like when I was doing my video with all the Cocugnos and Preppies, this would have been very handy to have, just to have them all sitting upright versus laying down on the desk. It takes up less space. And since if I don't want to have all this, I can just have that sitting there, rotate around, grab the pin I want to use it, put it back. So just to have that little bit of flexibility. But I liked this because for what it can do, it really doesn't take up all that much space. So this will be a nice addition, especially having something to hold ink vials. That was really part of the impetus. I had seen these, but I was like, oh, I can wait. I don't necessarily need that. But now that I'm doing more streaming and more ink swatching, it was time to get something to help with that. Because if you saw last week's stream, going through and trying to hold these while holding the glass dip nib or the swatching stick, and then not making a complete mess, we succeeded in doing that, but it was not the easiest thing. So this will make life a little bit easier. So I look forward to using this. And also just from a standpoint of doing something like a stream, I can set it where it's accessible but not taking up camera view, which is nice as well. So I look forward to using this, and I believe, like I said, the Pengineer3d.com is the website. And so definitely check them out. And there's some other options as well. And let me go back to the website here. So this tall one is called Fountain Pen Roulette. And that's what this center one was, the taller. And you can see there's options for all sorts of different materials and colors. And then, like I said, these are modular. The center post is static. So you can mix and match. If you were to get multiple of these, you can choose. And then here's the double holder, like I was talking about, as an option for a bottom tray. Now the bottom tray is separate. So it is kind of a, choose exactly what you want type option. You can see a little video here that they have on their site showing the option. So if you wanted to use this as your main pen holder, you could get a couple of the fountain pen roulettes. But the ink sample, now this was the other thing I think I was thinking of. There is a version for pencils, which has smaller openings. and it does have the foam on the bottom, so it's non-stick, or it'll get grip on a desk surface. And then there's also one for markers. So depending on, and crayons apparently, I didn't know there was a crayon one. So you can really customize this to your use case of what you might find helpful for your desk setup. So that's definitely neat to see. And then, like I said, you can choose a double base, a triple base. There is the ink station as well. So definitely, go check out the Pengineer3d, and let me see if I can just copy this since I don't have the keyboard on the desk. And I'll put that in the chat. So definitely click on that link and check it out. And, it's always great to help out another small stationery business. And then this was also the Pins by Pasquale website. I'll put that in there as well, just in case you're interested in looking at a Cerberus or some of the other pins that Nick has. He does great work. Lots of cool pins on here. He does different materials. So there's some that are ebonite, some that are acrylics, and he also sells blanks. So if you're a maker or you're interested in having blanks, you could order those as well. So say you wanted to do like I did and get one of these blanks, and then you could take it to a different maker and say, I'd like you to make your model of pen out of this blank, kind of like I did, where he happened to already own the poorly controlled blank, but the same principle. So definitely, go and check out those websites, and hopefully you find something interesting that you can come home with. So let's go on, and I'm going to work on, before I get to swatching, I want to test something here with the software I use for the streaming to see if this is going to work. Where I have it set up where it does not seem to be working. Okay, so that's not going to work as I thought, where it would put in the one button where I could put in like website address and things like that. So I'll have to look at that after the fact. So let's get this all put to the side. And I want to, the unboxing went a little bit quicker than I originally thought it might. So my plan to continue for the evening was just to work on, I have 4 Akkerman inks. So if you haven't seen previous streams, what I have is a plotter that is just for ink swatching and paper tasting or paper sampling. So in here, I've started to swatch. Not every ink I have will go in here just because there's a limited number of pages, but the heavy hitters. So these are all the pilots or Roshizuku inks. And I'm doing 6 papers. I have the Lamy inks, which I need to go back and add some of my new Lamy Crystal inks onto these. But this is handy to see how the ink behaves on different papers. So if you're using it for writing or you're using it for art or something like that, you can see what the expected color is. Now, there are some inks that won't change colors on certain papers or things like that. So what I'm going to be doing is continuing that and starting new papers, and I'll talk through the papers that I'm using for my Akkerman inks. So just going through the papers here, because I'll write the Akkerman on the top. And what I write that in is just a black. Now this is a Lamy multi-pin, but I've replaced the insides of this with Uniball inserts. So I'm using the black Uni insert, a D1, to write the title. And then I have a little template sheet here. that I put underneath the papers to give me grid lines. Hold that so the light gives a little bit of relief so you can actually see it. And then this is just an extra kind of scratch paper, so if something were to bleed through, so this way I can see the lines on the paper. And then I'll swatch the ink using one of the glass stirring rods, and then after that write the ink name on there. And then once everything is dried, these pages will go into that green plotter that's just used for the inks and papers. And I do use blotting paper. This is the Coffee Monsters Co. blotting paper just under my hand, because hand oils can really affect some of these Japanese papers. So that way I'm trying to keep the paper as untainted as possible, so that as I swatch future inks, I'm not skewing and having where I've got a nice ink swatch and then a thumbprint where my thumb was in the middle of the paper or something like that, or the bottom of my hand. Let's just start it here. And this first paper is just the plotter kind of standard paper. We'll get this written on all the top, and then we'll bring over the ink bottles and start the swatching process. So this next paper, this is Mnemosyne, and you'll notice this paper is slightly narrower, and that's because this paper is perforated in the book that it comes in the A5 book. So this, I like this to include in the swatching because this is a paper I use frequently. So that way I have it for reference. This is more of the day-to-day use type paper that I'd like to have for reference. Now, there's a good chance as I do more inks and my plotter rings get full that the Mnemosyne will come out, and probably the plotter paper, and that'll be more home reference versus what I keep in the plotter proper that I'll take with me to pen clubs or pen shows, things like that. So I still have the reference, but it's just not as... I'd rather take the more unique papers like the Tomoe 52 or the Life Bank or the Iroful and things like that, and have more of those sheets with the different inks versus the kind of utilitarian papers is kind of how I view the Mnemosyne and the plotter. Okay, this next one, this is Life Bank paper. And bank papers are being discontinued because the machine that they're made on apparently is no longer able to produce the papers. So there's a good chance eventually I'll be re-swatching any of the inks I've done on bank paper to something else, like maybe Sheep Cloud Bond, or once there's larger, now that it's starting to make its way out after the San Francisco Pen Show, the Canopus paper. I really liked the little Bible size sheets that I was given to play around with. So that could become the bank paper replacement, at least in my swatching book, but time will tell. This next one is Iroful. And Iroful is the paper that is known to show colors differently. And it shows it not differently for everything, but in some instances it will show it, like this one with the Teranishi Gentle Green, that if you've seen any of my paper testing videos, if you swatch that on here, and I can show it here in a minute when we get the plotter back out, it stays blue, where on other papers it dries to a nice greenish color, and thus the name Gentle Green. This next one here is Yu-Sari. And then finally, kind of the standard Tomoe River 52. Okay, and then let me shuffle things around and let me grab the inks that I'll be using. And of course, I get this Pengineer3d, and the bottles that I'm using tonight are some of the only bottles I have that would not fit in this in any way. So of course, you know, maybe not the best planning of which inks to do, but life happens. I'll be able to use this in the future for other uses. So as I mentioned, the inks I'm doing are the Akkerman inks. And I think Vanessa is one of the only, it's one of the few places in the States that sells Akkerman inks. But Akkerman, if you're not familiar, has some of the coolest ink bottles. And I currently only have 4 of these. Now there's many more, but these last a long time because one of these bottles is actually my first bottle of ink I ever purchased in 2013, which is, you switch the camera angle here. This Akkerman Shocking Blue, and you can see how old it is. That's how they used to label the bottles. Now they have like actual printed labels, so things have changed over time. But this was one of the first sheening inks before they were really a thing. And like I said, I purchased this December of 2013. And you can see how full the bottle still is. These are, I don't remember the exact measurement. They've since switched from many of their inks to the smaller bottles. Like this is the Oost Indigo number 9. So it's a smaller version. I get where those will sit side by side. Now, their Dutch Masters, which is a special edition, which are the other 2 I have, they do still come in the larger bottles. But how these bottles work is, if you look in here, you can see that marble. So when you go to, and actually I'll switch it that way, you can see the actual Akkerman logo. And these are from the Netherlands. Now these are made in The Hague. And there is a different Akkerman store in Amsterdam, which they're related, but they're not the same. So I've actually been to the Akkerman store in Amsterdam, but not the one where the inks are made. So I did not come home with inks. That's when I came home with my one and only Mont Blanc pen, just to have as a souvenir of that trip. But back to how these bottles work. You can see the marble in there. Well, what you do is when you turn it upside down, the marble lets the liquid through, and now you have a little filling vessel at the top where you can dip your nib in, get the ink you need, but then the rest of the bottle's down there, and then after you're done, you can kind of tip it sideways, and the ink will run back down, and it'll run down naturally over time. So this one hasn't been used in a bit. You can see that, oh, if I don't put my fingers in front of the camera, you can see on this one that the marble is just sitting there by itself, and that's because the liquid is drained down, but all it takes is a little tip of the bottle, and then you're ready to have access to the ink. So it's a neat principle, and the bottles just look cool. They look kind of like a potion bottle of some sort, you know, like you'd expect to see in some way. So let's talk through what these 4 inks are, and then we'll get to doing the swatching across the 6 different papers. So this one is the Dutch Masters. The That's the logo for all the Dutch Masters, so it doesn't actually show the color name. The color name is on the opposite side. And you can see this is the, these are the Dutch Masters, Art Masters. So this is the Bruin. Hals und Bruin, I believe is the correct pronunciation. Probably not. I apologize in advance if I'm saying it wrong. The other Dutch Master that I have is the Vermeer, which is kind of a nice burgundy color. The Shocking Blue, and then the Indigo. So let's set a couple of these to the side. We'll do one at a time. Let's start with the Bruin. And what I'm going to be using for the swatching is, let me switch back to the overhead camera. I have these, I guess the lighting is blocking a little, these glass stirring rods that I picked, or that I learned about through Olive Octopus ink. I'm going to try one other thing to see if this will go into the chat here. Nope. So if you go to oliveoctopus.ink, Lisa has a great article in there about her swatching tools and her process, because ink and ink swatching is more of her hobby within the pen area, and she's much more educated than I am on that part, and just a great resource. And she also has Twitch streams as well. And currently, a lot of people in the stationery through the Relay podcast community, like the Pen Addict and whatnot, they're currently doing a fundraiser for St. Jude the month of September. So go check out the website if you're able to. Oh, and then hey Lisa, glad to see you in the chat. If you want to throw a link up to your website or your St. Jude, feel free, so that way it's there if people are able to donate, because St. Jude is such a great cause. To donate to, Okay, so, and even though I was talking about how I did this, I'm actually going to tilt this down. I don't need a ton of ink in there, just so it's not right at the top as I'm putting in the swatching glass rod. And as I've done on a couple of these others, forgot to pre-loosen the lids. Luckily, this one cooperated pretty well. And then I almost forgot, for writing down the ink name, this is the Pen Addict ink thrower, and I have a Colorverse shuttle nib in there and the brass tip, and that's what I'll use to write the actual ink name. And because this is kind of a reference, I'm not writing full names, I'm writing short names. So this one I'll write Bruin. I'm not going to write Hals und Bruin, just to kind of keep the space a little bit more controlled, so I have plenty of room for future editions. Because I am going to Venice in October with some of the local pen club people for the Arkansas Pen Club meeting. So there's always a chance of coming home with another bottle of Akkerman whenever you go visit Venice. So just dipping in and then getting in just enough on there to get a swatch across the paper. And this is still something I'm going to have to figure out, which I think if I keep an empty ink vial, that would be tall enough to put in the Pengineer to set that into. So for now, I'll just swap it out here. Okay, so that's the first paper, and that was the Tomoe 52. Second is the Yu-Sari. And I have the Yu-Sari in loose leaf. I also have it in a notebook, but I need to use this. I owe somebody a return letter. Oh, that's cool. Packing up the St. Jude packets. And that's one thing with the campaigns, if you're not familiar. Different content creators do different incentives. You know, all the money goes to St. Jude, but just to help encourage people to donate. Like Lisa has some where she's mailing out paper samplers that she's made, or ink pony things, or opportunities to do like a call to get custom ink swatches and things like that. So there's all sorts of incentives. So definitely check out that plan. And then like Pen Addict, he's doing some where there's giveaways on his blog. So penaddict.com, you can see the blog and see things like that to get giveaways as people have donated pens that he's able to then offer as a giveaway, just as an incentive as he's hit certain milestones. I think he's already up to past $5,000 raised, and the campaign started, what, Lisa, like, wasn't it September 1st? It starts right at the beginning of the month. So this is the Iroful. Oh, that's a good point, Lisa. Yeah, the Pen Addict giveaways this year, you don't have to donate to enter into those giveaways. So, like I said, penaddict.com, you can enter in to win. I think he has 4 or 5 up currently, because I think he added each $1,000 milestone was a giveaway, and those giveaways run, if I remember correctly, through September 30th. And since I'm using the ink thrower, there are 2 pens from River City Pen Company, who makes the ink thrower. 2 pens of this kind of fire-ish material. And those are the only 2, because all the rest of the material was used for the different ink thrower models. So that'd be a chance to own a very unique maker pen from River City Pen Co. Okay, so here's the Life Bank paper. This is such a unique ink color, and seeing it dry, because I can see the other samples in front of me, how it's already going on to this Iroful different is interesting to see. And let me see if I can shuffle this around a little to make it where I can put that will work. I can set that in there. Of course, I need to use it to write at the moment. And you can see that's a much lighter on this bank paper than it has gone down on the other papers so far. So that's part of the neat thing with this, is just the exploration of seeing how much paper can make a difference, which that's something especially people who are new to the fountain pen hobby. Because I know when I first got into it, paper was not something, I had one paper and that's all I used. Now that I've kind of gotten back into the hobby over the last little more than a year, I've come to realize paper is just as, if not more important in some ways than the pen or the ink, because the ink is going to show up dependent on how the paper is. Okay, that's the Mnemosyne. This is a great ink. No, really, I am Lisa Marie. Which Lisa Marie, I showed this earlier, but since I see in the chat, we were talking about the Cerberus from Mr. Pasquale, and switch back over to the other camera here. The full video on this will come out for everybody on Saturday. Members already have access to it, but I said early on, I texted Nick. I was like, this pen is polished so well that when I took the picture for the thumbnail for YouTube and was editing it, I had to go back because you could see every single fingerprint of mine on here. But this material, the inside and the studio lights don't do it justice versus seeing this outside in the sun. It's kind of ridiculous how beautiful the material is. And this, I was in deep debate because I thought this ink that I'm swatching right now would be a great ink to go in the pen, but I didn't want to go too matchy. So that's why I went with the gray for the undertones and the shimmer match versus direct match, but this was on the short list. The other one I had was, I was thinking KWZ Honey, but I have that in a pen already and I didn't want to duplicate an ink. But the Papier Plume Oyster Gray, it was also a great fit for the undertones of the material. Okay, so that is paper number 6. Actually, I'll leave that there because we'll just go in reverse order this next time. Get this closed up. We'll get the... Oh, I just realized I did not switch back to the overhead camera. Get this put aside. Actually rinse off the nib holder before I start doing anything else. That way I don't come close to forgetting like last week I did multiple times. And if you can see, I'm just using a little spray bottle to rinse the shuttle nib off, and then I'll use a paper towel just to pull that extra water off of there. And then I have plenty of the glass stir rod, so it's just going to go into the mix. Put these back out of the way. Lisa Marie, do you have any new materials coming soon? Have you been cooking up any crazy new patterns? I have to thank for this is the only one and only Olive Octopus. She uses a different tool, but seeing that on her Twitch streams, that's where I picked up this technique. I already had that bottle, but it made too much sense to not do it that way, to clean off the shuttle nib or the kakamori or anything. So, It's not always necessary to reinvent the wheel if someone's already created a great way of doing something. So for the next ink, and I'll switch back over to... This is the Vermeer, which is the other of the Akkerman 4 that I have in the Dutch Master series. And if you didn't see earlier the bottle, how these work, you've got the marble in there. Once you tilt it over, the ink goes into the little filling chamber on the top. And then you can fill. And then at the end, just kind of hold it sideways. The marble will let the liquid pass back through and then it'll empty down. So just one of the coolest ink bottles, pretty much, in my opinion, that exists. And like I mentioned earlier, I think Venice is one of the only places that in the US that carries this. Obviously in international, the things will be different, but I'm not aware of anybody else off the top of my head who in the States is carrying Akkerman, but Venice was, I believe, the first, and that's normally my go-to, for, especially for an ink like this. Like I said, there's a good chance in October when I go visit Little Rock to visit the Arkansas Pen Club that I will come home with a bottle of Akkerman, because there's a couple of colors that I was eyeing last time and I behaved. But you can only go to the same store so many times and not come back with the thing. If you pick it up more than once or twice, you know eventually you're going to get it. So, drove all the way out there. I might as well come home with it. Two new designs, very cool. Okay. And I do like this Vermeer. It's red tone, but it's not bright red, because bright red, for me, it's not something I'm going to use often, because I would just think of like teacher marking a paper in bright red. Okay. So this is back to the bank paper. And I know the camera's not showing it well, but I do have the grid below, and that's what I'm using to kind of keep these pretty standardized. If you weren't on earlier when I was showing the under paper. It's just a piece of the laconic monthly paper that I use in my A5 plotter. So that was handy to have it as a guide for this use case with these punched papers for that ink and paper plotter. Okay. So this is the Iroful. Sorry about that. Hopefully that was not too loud. Hitting the microphone is always fun. That is one thing I learned when doing streams with a microphone on an arm. It's great for doing a podcast, but when you need to have access to what you're doing in front of you, it either blocks your hands or blocks your eyes or blocks more than it helps most of the time, it feels like. Okay, and then the last paper for this one here. This is the Tomoe 52. Yeah, the more I do this, Lisa, the more the headset makes sense, but then I don't want to have like 12 different things for, for the podcast and whatnot. This is a much better fit for that. And I honestly enjoy doing the interviews and whatnot. That's one of the favorite things to come of the YouTube channel. So having good audio on that for me has been a big motivator in the buy once, cry once type mentality. Okay. This Vermeer really, when rinsing it like this, it really looks like cleaning a cut. It's very blood colored as it dries and as rinsing it off the nib. Didn't really think of it once watching it, but it definitely has that look when cleaning or rinsing it. Okay. So we've got that. We got 2 left. We'll go with the indigo next. I guess I should probably tilt this up and get some ink in the top chamber first would be smart. Yeah, that's one thing. A good microphone that you have is going to last because some of those old mics are heavily sought after. It's like old amps. Some people, they would much rather have the amp made in the late 70s, early 80s or earlier versus something new because it's probably better build quality. Probably it has a unique sound. And microphones are very much the same way. I was on a stream the other day that's related to the little mixer board thing I got, and somebody was talking about their vintage stereo microphones, which you don't really hear about those anymore. And they lived in a different part of the country, but they had a great suggestion. And I think in Nashville, it probably applies more than most places to go hit up all the local pawn shops because there's a good chance you could really find some good deals here of people who had their equipment and sold it or decided to move it on due to whatever reason. And I hadn't thought about that, but that might be a field trip one day. So Lisa, now I'm curious, what model microphone is it? I just realized we have Lisa and Lisa Marie in the chat. If we had Lisa Vanessa, we could get a 3 of a kind. Okay, and this is the Iroful again. Sure, Beta 57. Was talking to my friend a while back who was also an audio engineering major at Belmont and now works in IT. And he sent me a screenshot of his desk. He's like, this is what I use for a Teams call. And I'm like, okay, that makes perfect sense. It mixer board, his SM7B from back in the day, hooked in through an interface, through whatnot. It's crazy how the SM7B is it's become the go-to microphone for like podcasts and things like that. And they've held their value so well over time. Okay. The final paper for this one. This is just the plotter paper. kind of funny you say that, Lisa. I was trying to think the other day, someone from college, like, who I knew in more of an acquaintance thing, they popped in my head, and I was like, I cannot remember that person's name. I could picture their face, but I could not remember their name to save my life. I still don't know what it is, but I guess that's how the brain works. You remember certain parts, but not everything. It's always fun when you're doing something pen related and you get a random message from someone else pen related that's not really what you're doing at the time. But when I was listening to my first time listening to the live recording of the Pen Addict podcast today, when they were talking about Matthew Chen, I sent Matthew a message saying, hey, you got mentioned today. And about him being probably one of the most traveled Nibmeisters Brad could think of, because he seems to be everywhere at every show. This is one thing, I think they've improved it with the later Akkerman bottles, but this one being the OG, that little plastic paper thing in there always sticks on the bottle in this shocking blue. And it has made a mess multiple times. But I don't want to take it out because I don't want it to risk drying out the ink. This one should be a good sample though, because it being a sheener before sheeners were really a thing, as Lisa Van Ness described it. Okay. I'm shocked at how many times he goes to like Rome each year. I think he goes like twice to Stilo and Still? Is that the Stilo and Stile? Is that the name of the store there? Although I already have plans to get at least one Kodachi ground in Arkansas next year, because I realized all of my ground nibs are Yovo 6, and my local makers, be it Mr. Pins by Pasquale and TriStar Studios, they use Bach number 6, so I cannot swap those out, so I need at least one Kodachi on the Bach side. Not that I have swapped my other one out because it just is so great on that Newton Prospector, but it's the principle of it. I know it's. I just didn't know if I was pronouncing that store correctly. Remember when I interviewed him, he talked about that was one he went to, and I knew it's. I just don't know if I'm saying it correctly. That was my. I'm sure there's some still remnants of the Texan, and now pretty much the Tennessean with the accents combined. Trying to pronounce Italian names. Because having been in many choirs for many years, it was rare to. There were a couple of times I had to sing in Italian, but singing in it's different because it's, at least for me, it was a different way of learning. You're not learning a language, you're learning a song. And it just was different in my brain for some reason. And then again, there were so many Italian composers because of the way things were at the time. Italian composer, writing in Latin. So you sing a lot of Latin. Okay, so it looks like only one more paper. And then we'll get all these for a nice side-by-side comparison. Okay, get this nib rinsed off a little, and as careful as I tried to be, there are little ink splatters of shocking blue from opening that all over this desk mat, so the character is being added to. I knew it was not an if but when, but still. So Lisa, I know you already hit your goal for St. Jude early on. Have you been able to decide on what new milestones to add for after the fact yet? Okay, let's get all these lined up here. Guess I can center those a little bit better in the camera so that one's not hiding behind the chat window. So let me see if I can zoom that camera in slightly to show this a little bit better. Wanting to move really quickly. Oh, go the other way. Okay, there we go. Got one still under the chat box. Yeah, and that's why I love doing this, Lisa Marie, is just seeing how much a difference the paper can make. And even just how some ink show, like Shocking Blue, I know it's still drying on most of these, but to me it looks more purple. And I don't know exactly what color it's going to be coming through on the stream, because one monitor has it looking much darker. The other monitor has it looking more purple, like especially on this Yu-Sari sample down here. This one looks really purple, and that's the plotter paper. But I love that you can see, and I've got leaving ink fingerprints, which is great, how the sheens, like on the Vermeer on some of these, like this Iroful, that kind of gray variation that comes through there. And then you look at the paper next to it, the Yu-Sari, and it's nowhere near as pronounced. You can kind of see a little bit in the corner, and I don't even think the camera is really picking that up. Like the Brune on this paper here is really light, which I believe that was the bank paper. And then you can see the more variation on the rest of them. I think of these inks, the indigo is probably the most consistent across the 6 papers. Yeah, it's just, that's why this is fun. You really don't know what you're going to get. It does kind of end up like that, at least Marie. You can start to see it on this one here. At least I can. I think with the pooled ink on there, it's not showing the same. You can kind of see it on this middle one here. It's starting to get red on the top and come through, but unfortunately you can only get so close or it distorts with the overhead camera, and the desk camera is not gonna give the best view. But I might just pull these out and go flip through on a future stream, flip through all the swatching that's been done, or do kind of just lay out multiple papers, or do it as a blog post or something like that, to kind of show why this is cool, why this is worth doing across 6 papers, and why I chose the papers I did, and why a couple of these papers probably are not going to live in the plotter all the time. They're going to be more for home reference, being the Mnemosyne and the Plotter Paper, because I consider those utility papers, where the Yu-Sari, the Tomoe 52, the Iroful, and the bank paper are more papers that you're going to use in other type of writing, journaling or letter writing or things like that. But I still at least have it if someone specifically asks, hey, do you know what this looks like on the plotter paper or on the Mnemosyne? I have that as an option. So let me see if this will behave and go back to its spot when I click the button. Look at that, it did. Close enough. So that's the Akkerman, and I did want to show, I did this on the stream last week, and I'll grab the plotter and show the comparison of the Lamy crystal. Now I have not done it on the 6 papers yet, but the azurite, which went down purple and did not end up with any real semblance of purple on the swatch cards. Let me hold these over to the... So now that those are fully dried, you can see the slightest little bit of purple. But from how that went down as a deep purple and ended up like that, it was very much reminiscent of how the dark lilac performs. So let me see. Put these off so they can dry and not get on top of each other. I'm really gonna have to try and curate this music a little better next time, because I feel like I'm in an elevator. Way too much saxophone going on. Every so often it's fine, but okay, so let's take a look in here at the Lamy sheets and compare to that's a Lamy. Okay. And the other reason I was talking about removing those papers is, as you can see, these plotter rings are very small, which is how they're designed. So for this use case, this is not exactly the best option, but I'm going to make it work because that's how I wanted it to be. So we'll find a way. But let's look at these here. And like I said, I need to swatch the newer Lamy crystals. We seem to keep accumulating those each time we go to Gentleman Stationer. Can't imagine why. But I think there's 10 total, and as you can see, we have 7. We have almost all of them now, because I have, I think, 3 more. We have the ruby that needs to be swatched on here, the azurite, and the benitoite that needs to be swatched. But so when you add these in, this second ink up here is Lamy Dark Lilac, which, once again, if you said, hey, which one of these inks on these papers was the dark purple ink, it's the last one that most people would go to and say, oh yeah, it's that one. So there must be something with, and I don't know if it's just how they mix in their sheen, but for this to also be a purple ink that sheens over this much, it's interesting that characteristic. Because I own a few sheening inks, but I'm not gonna, like the dark lilac I had no interest in. Beth, on the other hand, is like, I love it, I must own it, so we own it. I am not necessarily one who loves the super sheening inks, because I kind of want to know what they're gonna look like. Especially like, look on this Tomoe 52. I mean, that's like bright electric green there. So it's a unique phenomenon with certain colors of how they sheen over and dry. So, but that emphasizes to me why this is cool to do, to see that. And now I know that, oh, I need a bright green ink that looks like the Green Goblin from Spider-Man. I'm going to go with dark lilac. But Derek, that's a purple ink. Yes, but give it time to dry and then you'll see why. And especially people who are who've not experimented with inks as much, or who are new to the hobby, something like this can really illustrate how important paper is. And since we have such an active pen club and, doing videos and things like that, this is letting me learn more, but it also, I now have a portable resource to let other people see. So then that might give them the motivation. Hey, let me go swatch the inks I have at home on these papers I like to use, so they know what the result will be if they're looking to use it for a letter or something specific, or doing the, Olive Octopus Lisa does. And I will do at some point on the stream. I have the book, but I have not ever even opened the box. One of the dominant industry books where you use the fountain pen inks for art. That is going to be a future stream once I kind of probably do a trial page, because I'm all for doing some things like unboxings and whatnot live, but I want to, there's some logistics in the art side that I think I want to work out before I jump into that. Not going to try and perfect it, but at least make sure that the camera angles will show everything like it needs to and things like that. But so just a reminder, we switch back over here. Don't forget to go check out, the pins by Pasquale to see the different pins Nick is doing. He has different ones up there, and then he has his individual blanks. And then if you go to poorlycontrolled.com, you can see the blanks that Lisa Marie, who's in the chat, makes, which are awesome. And that's what gave us the blank for the Cerberus. And hey, Ann, how's it going? So, and then also the Pengineer3d, which I unboxed this early on in the stream, but I'll switch back to the overhead view here. This is just going to be fun to have, and now I have something to actually put ink vials in and not try and hold the ink vials while doing the swatching like I did last week, which kind of amazed I did not make a huge mess. But this should give me some options for going forward. And then I got this, and I'm already tempted to get another base, like the single base, although I think this would sit fine by itself, because it does have the, and I didn't show that earlier. I mentioned it. There's like a foam, like craft foam on the bottom here, and that's what's inside the individual cylinders. Kind of shows it of the pin holder, so that your pins aren't going to get scratched up. Because I think this is going to end up sitting just on the desk to have. I've got off camera you don't see. I've got a little side set of drawers like you'd have at a desk that sits below my desk that I have my pin tray on from Stationery Stack, and I love that. But there's also something nice about having a couple of different pins on top of the desk that doesn't take up a ton of real estate, because when doing the day job I have the keyboard here and then I'm a trackball guy, so 2 different mice between personal computer and work computer going back and forth. So desk real estate can come at a premium, so it's always good to have options. And this, I think actually, and I think you have some of this, and I know Lisa, or Olive Octopus Lisa, has some Pengineer3d stuff. So seeing friends get it, and see, okay, they're enjoying it, that made it a no-brainer for me, of seeing people who I know are also in the hobby and they've had good experiences. That makes it easy. So don't be hesitant. It seems like it's great quality 3D printing. And I do like that on the bottom it even has in there like Pengineer3d in the print. That's just neat. Little things like that. But especially excited to have the vial holders. And I might eventually just pick up a second pen holder, because then if I'm doing swatching, I can just put in one that has swatching tools on it. So the Kakamori, my other nib holder that has the other nib holder with the Kakamori, the color shuttle in here. I've got my glass dip nib, so I can change them out for whatever I'm doing at the moment. And that way I'm not having to switch out each individual pen. So that is on the docket. And then also the inking station that I showed earlier. And I do like this blue color that I got. It's got a really cool pattern to it. So I look forward to using that. If nothing else, in videos, just like I said, doing some of this stuff through a camera is a whole different world, where you're watching to make sure you can see everything right, and it's much easier to spill or hit something or whatnot because your attention is split naturally. So just a nice little option. And being able to put whatever bottle, like this Lamy Crystal is a kind of odd rounded triangle shape. Being able to put that in there and have it be nice and solid, that's just good peace of mind for then inking. And I guess I can ask on here, because I know 2 of you in the chat at least have this. Do you actually use the little sponge, or have you replaced it with something else? Or is it just kind of a catch-all? Because that's where I didn't want to do anything with it before the stream, because, well, I unboxed it on the stream, so I didn't even really know exactly what it was going to look like. But I could see not using that all that much because they are pretty thin, or maybe getting a thicker piece to put there for cleaning a nib off with or something like that. But that'll be something to experiment with going forward. So I think that's pretty much all I had planned for tonight. I appreciate you stopping in and taking some time to kind of follow along as I did more of these ink swatching and showed off the new pins by Pasquale Cerberus, as well as the Pengineer3d 3D printed ink holders and pen holders that are going to be very helpful in just the stationery hobby and use as a whole, but especially in doing videos and streams, kind of acting as that third hand to help the streams or videos go in as smooth as possible. So don't forget, go to oliveoctopus.ink. I know Lisa has a page up about her St. Jude Tiltify that's going on for the month of September, where the stationery community and the relay community is coming together to donate to St. Jude, worthy cause and great benefits. So there's multiple campaigns going on. Quite a few who have been guests on the stationery feed in the past. Lisa, Olive Octopus, Kaleidocraft with Jacqueline and others. So check those out. Then also the Pen Addict. So there's a variety of people, regardless of which one you go to, all the money's going directly to St. Jude. And that's the important part at the end of the day. And there'll be a ton of extra streams and content to see throughout this month, as you know, all these different creators are talking about that to help raise money for such a worthy cause. So definitely check in and, you know, contribute if you're able to the St. Jude giving month of September from the stationery community. And welcome, David. Appreciate you popping in. We're about to be signing off for the night, but appreciate you hopping in here at the end. And if you missed it, you know, you can check the video on demand. It'll be there on the YouTube channel after it's done, just to see what swatching we did with the Akkerman inks tonight, and then the unboxing of the Pengineer3d and whatnot. So I'm going to leave you there. I will have another stream next Thursday night, and I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. I'll decide that over the next day or so and then get it posted, but it will be 6 p.m. Central next Thursday evening. And you know, once again, thanks for spending some time, and I will see you next week.